in Baldur's Gate 3 at the very beginning, you have the situation with the Emerald Grove and the Druids, and you have Kaga, who has not have a lot of leadership experience, be left in charge of the Grove and the Druids, and she is afraid of the goblins, so she's experiencing a ton of fear. She is very unconfident, she leans towards anger. And so when the Shadow Druids come in and they offer her a solution that's going to protect her and the things that she loves, because Kaga genuinely loves the Grove and loves the people there. I know that for sure. But she's just afraid. She's afraid of the goblins. So what if we take that and we take a leadership lesson from that, and how do leaders respond to fear, and how do we walk through all those things? I think looking at video games with all of that in mind is awesome. That's what I truly, truly love.
Control-Alt-Redeem is for anyone called to ministry in the digital frontier. Gamers, streamers, and everyday believers navigating life online. Each episode equips you to live on mission and the real stories of lives being changed. Reset your expectations, reframe your mission, and redeem the space you're already in. This is where digital ministry gets practical, creative, grounded, and hopeful. One episode at a time.
All right. Welcome in, everybody, to Control-Alt-Redeem. We're working to reset the culture and redeem the space. And what a privilege it is to have Dr. Levelup with me on the podcast today. Welcome in, friend.
Hey, welcome, welcome. It's an honor to be here and to hang out with you today.
Yeah, it's interesting to have, I think, been in the same conference a couple of times together, to be in several Discord channels together, and yet probably not have a whole lot of one-on-one conversations with you. So
No.
I am looking forward to hearing more about what God is doing in and through you, and just seeing where the conversation goes today.
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
And we've got a few people in here. Let me say hi to a few people. And Star Fox is in here. Mr. Pete from Alabama is here at Mr. Pete 3D. He does a lot of VR stuff.
Yeah, I've heard.
Yep. And tomorrow. I always like saying tomorrow because it's not today, it's tomorrow. So good to have all of you in here and hanging out for the podcast. One of the things that is fascinating to me is the wide variety of people that God is using. You know, like we look at the 12 apostles and we're so built into who they were and what they did. And, you know, most people could rattle it off. Oh, yeah, 4 of them were fishermen. One of them was a tax collector. You got a zealot in there. And maybe we don't know the professions of everybody else, but we don't realize how diverse that is. And for a long time, ministry has seemed to have been, well, you have to be a certain type of person to do ministry. And so to have this space, it's just so fascinating to me, the different levels of people that are doing things. So where are you coming at this from?
Oh man, that question can go a lot of directions. I am kind of coming at this from the perspective of the teacher. Ultimately, I am a college professor. That's what I do in my day job, and so I ultimately want to teach. I want to use examples from media and video games and just fantasy, Dungeons and Dragons, to teach concepts. It's so cool now. You're able to like just really relate anything to anything. One of my big passions is to help people think about the media that they consume and not consume it passively. You're sitting through playing this huge epic RPG and you're going through all this political intrigue and you're, dealing with all of these different things. Like, what lessons can we actually learn from that and actually apply that to our lives? I think that's awesome.
Have you
People just veg out and consume media passively,
right?
and I think that's the worst way to do it.
Have you, because you are a teacher, have you done any teaching on how to take the content that's there and intentionally teach from it to say, here's a lesson that's in there and here's what have you done any of that kind of a how to do that?
I have a little bit in the classroom. We're all the time using case studies examples, and that's actually what kind of inspired
Right, exactly.
this entire thing. Is I teach a communication for leaders course as one of my classes, and in that particular course there's a case scenario or case study where we look at a lady. This is just a made up story that they walk through. We look at this lady named Sally, whose mother is really sick, and so she's always on the phone with her mom, even though she's supposed to be working in an office, right? How do we handle those situations? What do we do as leaders? How do we combine the idea of, okay, here's what the policy is versus, okay, where does empathy come
Mm,
from? How do we evaluate what to do? And I'm thinking, okay, we do that in case studies all the time, but what if we do that with video games? I don't know if you've ever played Baldur's Gate 3,
oh
but
yeah.
In Baldur's Gate 3 at the very beginning, you have the situation with the Emerald Grove and the Druids, and you have Kaga who does not have a lot of leadership experience, be left in charge of the Grove and the Druids, and she is afraid of the goblins. So she's experiencing a ton of fear. She is very unconfident. She's not a confident leader at all. She leans towards anger. And so when the shadow druids come in and they offer her a solution that's going to protect her and the things that she loves, because Kaga genuinely loves the grove and loves the people there. I know that for sure. But she's just afraid. She's afraid of the goblins. So what if we take that and we take a leadership lesson from that, and how do leaders respond to fear, and how do we walk through all those things? I think looking at video games with all of that in mind is awesome. Like, that's what I truly truly love. We can look at the different
Well, even
archetypes and
yeah,
classes
yeah.
in D&D and be the same thing.
Right. I was going to add, even in there, when someone does come and offer suggestions, are they doing it out of wanting to help you succeed, or do they have ulterior motives that
Mhm.
they're trying to take advantage of the situation? This is going to bolster them. And I think in video games, your mind is thinking about that automatically. In the
Mhm.
church world, we automatically want to assume that there is no hidden motive behind people offering us suggestions. There probably is. We need to learn to evaluate those. As a leader, why is this person giving this suggestion? Is it a great suggestion, or is this to their advantage that they're going to gain something from it and it's not actually what we need to do? So,
Mm.
man, that's a fantastic way to be thinking about things. And even if you don't know Baldur's Gate, which I happen to, because I haven't played it all the way through, but I did start it a couple of years ago. My son was on the beta for Baldur's Gate 3, so he was always telling me about it. And we'd played 1 and 2 back when he was in high school, so it was fun to join in and do that. But there's those lessons that are there of watching the interaction play. That was one reason I love RPGs, is
Mm.
you are actually trying to think through the consequences of the actions that you make, and the choices you make in the game lead to certain things you can no longer do because you've eliminated possibilities.
Yeah. It's really interesting, particularly with Baldur's Gate, because choice is just they've baked it into every corner of it. Like the things that you can do. And like a lot of RPGs, even if they're a lot more streamlined and there aren't a lot of choices involved, you're just playing through a story. Even in those examples, you're seeing like how the protagonist responds to this. And a lot of times it's not the protagonist, because in a lot of RPGs, the protagonist is just like the catalyst to get through the story, but it's everybody around him and how they're responding to everything that I think you can learn so much about how to lead people. Like we look at all these stories, you're like, oh man, that's such an awesome story of growth. What if we actually applied that? What if
Right.
we actually applied the principles that this character that we love went through to our own lives? How would our lives actually be better? And that's what I ultimately want to try to get across with what I'm doing.
Yeah, I think that's really cool. And, you know, having played a lot of RPGs, you are constantly working to have the other characters in the game have more allegiance to you,
Mhm.
whatever way that is set up. So I am doing things to serve other people while I'm trying to do the game because it's more advantageous for myself to do that, as opposed to treating everyone badly and they want to leave my party. So
Mhm.
there's all of those levels that are really really cool, and bringing those examples in. I love that. I love that, man. So we'll come back. We'll circle back around to this
I'm
probably
sure
again.
we will. Yeah.
And but I do want to, like, how did you get started and connected on Twitch? Like, were you a viewer that came and were watching other people play? Were you a gamer that just said, "Hey, there's a place I can go play," and went in that direction? How did you get connected onto Twitch?
So I first found Twitch before it was even Twitch. I'm probably one of the few out there still, I feel like, that found it when it was Justin.tv. I really found it right as they were beginning to transition over to Twitch. And there was this streamer who was written about on a website. I think it was like Polygon, or it would have been Joystick back in the day. It would have been Joystick back in the day that it was written about. And the streamer was called Man versus Game. And he doesn't stream anymore, but he would go through like really difficult, challenging games and just stream that gameplay to everybody and sit there and rage and fight through it all. And I read that article about it. I'd never heard of this website before. And so I'm clicking in and I'm looking at this. I'm like, oh, well, this looks really fun. Like this looks really, really neat. Maybe I wanna get involved in some of this. And so I initially was just a viewer for a really long time, and then I started to say, well, what does it take to stream? And this was back in the day when there was not OBS like we have now. There was not a lot of great software out there to be used. In fact, the first thing I streamed on was the Flash Media Encoder way
Oh,
back in the day.
wow. Yeah.
Yeah, way back in the day. And I'm not, I mean, I just turned 40, so I'm not even that old, but 15 years ago in the Twitch sphere, like we didn't have OBS, we didn't have anything. There was a software called XSplit that people used to use a
Yep.
lot. And yeah, but my first time was using Flash Media Encoder and it was awful. I like streamed at like 10 frames per second. It was horrible.
Oh
And
my
so I
goodness.
stopped and I was like, okay, how do I do this? And I was at the time, because I was a teacher, I was a MacBook guy, and so I had a MacBook, and I'm like, well, I need to put Windows on this. So I installed Windows on my MacBook, and I'm like, okay, here's how we stream. I paid for the XSplit subscription, all those different things, and then come to find out that my internet was way too slow. And so I was like, well, this $20 a month internet's not going to cut it. And I'm looking at the budget, and I'm like, well, we'll just up it. We pay for more. And so this was would have been not even, yeah, cable internet. So it would have been like Southwest or Southwestern Bell or something. And so got better internet and I started streaming on my MacBook with Windows installed on it, with the camera on there. And I had a buddy of mine send me his he bought a newer microphone and sent me his older Blue Yeti mic.
Okay.
And so I literally was sitting on on my recliner with the Blue Yeti sitting on the MacBook with the camera and the gameplay, and I had an Elgato capture card, the first one that they put out, and
Oh,
I
yeah.
started playing. The first game I started streaming was Final Fantasy 9. Final Fantasy 9 was the first game I streamed, and yeah, that's how I got started. But things shifted quickly. I realized I loved it, and so I bought a PC. I built my first PC so I could stream better.
Cool.
And so I built my first PC with my father-in-law and started streaming. I actually left Twitch and went to another platform to stream called Hitbox. Hitbox was owned by a group out of Austria, and it was a European-based
Oh, yeah.
website.
Yeah, I remember that.
And they just kind of had a different vibe over there. I got connected with some people who were over there. Actually, I met Jate there. You know Jate,
Oh,
and
yeah.
so that's well, I've known Jate for a long time now, and I believe that's where I met him, if not in the next part of the story. And I streamed over there, and I actually ended up working for them. I actually became a community ambassador and traveled to
Wow.
different cons for them and things like that. I'm not an esports guy, and they were heavily esports, so I had to learn the esports universe. I remember going to a League of Legends event that they were hosting, and I'm out there in front of all these guys that like to play League, and I'm trying to hype them up and get the crowd going, and throw out T-shirts and things like that. And I just immediately, so this is kind of an interesting thing that God used. I just immediately went to all of my youth pastoring knowledge. So I've been a youth pastor. I was a youth pastor at the time. I'm like, I'm just going to hype this crowd up like I do my kids. And that it all worked out great. Nobody knew that that's what I was thinking in the back of my mind. And so I worked for them for a while. That company, like a lot of streaming startups, did not make it. And so I ended up, because I didn't have an established audience or anything on Twitch at that point. I just went ahead and went over to Mixer. And so I went over, it was Beam.pro back when it started. And so I went over to Beam, which Microsoft bought and eventually became Mixer. And I streamed there and became a partnered streamer for them for over a year. I actually almost went to full-time streaming. I almost went there. I'm glad I didn't. I think it was God looking out for me because they also shut down.
Yeah, yeah.
And so when they shut down, I was very sad. I was very kind of feeling burnt out by the whole content creation thing.
Yeah.
And God was opening some other doors in my life where right after they shut down, I actually had an offer from the college where I teach to them to pay to get my doctorate degree. And so I took them up on that, and I didn't stream at all for 2.5 years. Not at all. I would once in a while, sometimes on the weekends. I do a little bit of here
Yeah.
and there just to stay connected. And I worked on that degree, and it was a degree in leadership. And so as I was finishing that up, I was just trying to think, well, what do I want to do next? And during COVID and during just kind of the time after that, there was a genre of creators that kind of popped up that goes by the name Tavern Core. And there's different ones. Quincy's Tavern is the most popular one. And I was thinking to myself, well, this looks really, really cool. I kind of want to do that. I kind of want to do that. And so I told my wife, and we decided to build this set in our basement. It's literally a basement. I have no ceiling. Like it's an old school basement. We had this wall and I put this set up and we've kind of just gone from there. June 2nd will be a year of the Guiding Lantern. So I'm right at a year of doing that now. And yeah, that's kind of the TLDR of how I got into.
Yeah, that's the
There's
big
the
arc.
story arc. Yeah.
That's it's fascinating. I love how you brought up the going in one direction, thinking maybe go forward, and then wait, this didn't happen, this other thing happened, and then God protecting you, because I do think we don't always see that at times, but I think it's important when we notice it to acknowledge it and remember it, because sometimes we get impatient and wanting to go in a direction, and maybe sometimes the reason the door's not opening, I'm saying this to myself right now, actually, like sometimes the reason the thing is not moving forward is we're being protected from not going a direction we shouldn't be going. And I think that's an important piece for us to realize at times, which only telling stories of when we can see that is true, do we remember that can be true in the middle of us and what we're doing right now. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I do think there's also, since you're talking about different platforms that are shutting down, and there are more out there. Rec Room is shutting down. If you had not heard, or if you're not over in Rec Room is shutting down June 1st. They're done. And this is just a good reminder that you need to be diversified on some level of places where you're going to put your content. And you can't always say, well, I can be safe if it's a platform that has, funding and they're viable as a business. You still need to be thinking about where is my content and being diversified in different places in case they shut down or you get booted from a platform. So
Yeah. And what I hate to tell people is that there's only one platform that's actually viable as a business, and it's not Twitch. It's actually YouTube. They're the only one.
Right. But yes, even though they are the only ones viable as a platform,
Yeah.
they also can ban you.
Yeah, they can.
You can get shadow banned.
Yep.
They say it's not a thing. I've seen people that have showed me evidence that looks like it's a real thing. So if you put everything in one place and you suddenly don't have connection to people, you don't have, the platform shuts down or they ban you, what do you do next? There's those realities. If we're doing ministry to people and we want to reach them where they are, we go to where they are. And I don't mean to the other side is go be on every platform, because you won't reach everybody if you're on every platform.
Yeah. And that's one of the things I'm learning making short form content is that, everybody, like my stuff is not resonating on TikTok that much, which is interesting. It's just not. Whereas YouTube seems to get the most comments and the most traction. I still post on TikTok. I still post on Instagram Reels, but I'm looking at my analytics on TikTok more than anywhere else. I'm like, this is the people I'm going to make this content for, because ultimately this is where the most traction's happening. But yeah, that's just solid advice. There's a lot of different platforms out there that are trying lots of different things. And, everybody thought, "Oh, well, Microsoft bought Mixer. It's gonna be around forever." No, that's not what happened. The interesting thing is being a partner and kind of having a fuller understanding of the story. One of the things that Mixer had was they had developed this technology that was basically had 0 latency between your what you're doing and what the chat is seeing. It was just instant.
Right.
Microsoft took that and they used that for everything else that they
Right.
do at their company. And eventually they're like, well, we tried this whole thing with Mixer. It's not making any money. It costs us a lot to run this. We're gonna shut it down. And that's what happened. And it was hard. Like it was genuinely hard for a lot of people when that happened, because some folks had built their entire
Oh yeah.
livelihood around one platform. They had built all of their friendships and relationships around one platform. And, in a moment, it was gone. I mean, literally, they announced it, and 2 months later, it was completely closed. And so it is important to spread out, but I think even in that, as you're thinking about spreading out, what analytics am I gonna pay the most attention to? Where am I gonna be looking at that? And whether it's TikTok or YouTube or Kick or Rumble or whatever you decide to do. Like, I take most of my videos and also put them up on Rumble. No one views them, but hey, they're there, and that's fine. Maybe someday they will. But yeah, it's just good advice to diversify and not be caught in one thing. And that's one of the things, like, I tell people who are Christians wanting to make a difference in this space. You don't have to stream. Like, you really don't.
Right.
You don't have to stream. You can do other things that people find interesting, and if you wanna stream, sure, go for it, but you don't have to.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've
Yeah.
had mods on the podcast before talking about being mods. How can they serve? How can they go into chats? How do they engage people from a different vantage point instead of being the streamer? Because sometimes, I mean,
Mhm.
the mods are setting the culture of the chat that's happening so that the streamer can do what the streamer's doing. And, you're going to pick that up and be in symbiosis with the streamer, but you can do a whole lot as a moderator that the streamer may not be able to do. And so those are some really good things to think about too. Or even just the people that go around to visit streams and they
Mhm.
bring like a I'll use the example because we're talking tavern, Norm, every time
Uh,
Norm walks through the door of Cheers, everybody hollers Norm. Nobody else gets that. There are those people that are going to show up in your stream and as soon as they say something, everybody starts talking to that person. And they go around from stream to stream. So you can serve and be used in multiple ways without being the streamer. You could also be
Absolutely.
you can also use talents if you have them in helping streamers. Hey, I saw this over in this space. Another streamer was using this tool. Would you like me to help you be able to do that? Because I notice you don't have a lot of stuff in your chat or you don't have a lot of, overlays or whatever it might be. You can be a person that encourages, supports, raises up, and shares skills, talents, any of those kinds of things. It's fun to watch what people are doing.
Yeah, it really, really is. I was talking with another streamer just recently, and he's been trying to do a lot of stuff on YouTube, and he's been posting a lot to YouTube. I'm like, man, if you just took like 5 minutes to make like a halfway attempt at a thumbnail, like just try barely, it'd probably go better. And he's like, I don't have time. Like I said, I just don't have time with everything that I do. And I said, would you have a mod or somebody in your community that maybe you could pay for a Canva subscription and they could, if you can afford it, and I think they probably can based upon the amount of subs and stuff they have. And I'm just like, pay for a Canva subscription and get some people to help you, because I imagine there's people who would love to help out and grow a ministry and partner with you in that way. And I think that that's a really important thing to think about. Like, a lot of folks don't want to be spread too thin. I saw in the chat somebody mentioned that, and it's true. You don't want to be spread too thin, but at the same time, If you want to have a footprint in different places, you're ultimately either going to spread yourself too thin, burn yourself out, or get help. And that the last one's the right option.
Oh yeah, anytime you can get help, you are yeah, it's fantastic. I think one of the things that a lot of people have difficulty with is how do I get someone to understand what I want? It's easier for me to do it myself,
Mm.
And sometimes you have to commit to, and this is a hard thing, and even with parents, this is a hard thing. Okay, because I know plenty of parents who would be marveled at my kids helping me do projects around the house. Like, how do you get them to do that? By taking it slow. Like,
Mhm.
to begin with, my kid's job was to watch and hand me tools.
Mhm.
Okay. They didn't get everything to do things. So, where can you invite people in on a small level, have them start, have them move on, learn the skills, so that they can join in? The other thing is when they have the skills, now you need to learn how to communicate what you're looking for so they can apply it the way you want. And I think that's getting easier and easier when what I can do is go and look and say, this person over here, their thumbnails, that's what I want. Hey, can you create ones that are like that? And
Mm.
and even just start with that direction I love the idea of I'll subscribe to this for you if you can help me be able to make those things.
Yeah. And see, that's the thing. Like you say that, people are like, well, I can do it better myself. I'm like, well, you need to develop some leadership skills because
Oh,
there's probably
that's
yeah.
so true. That's so true. Yeah, you need some
Yeah,
leadership skills.
you need leadership skills. You gotta actually take the time. I had a student who really wanted to help me. So besides teaching where I teach, I also handle all their social media. And I had in the budget opportunity to hire a student intern. And I said, hey, I put it out there and I had a student say, well, I'm kind of interested, but don't know what I'm doing. I said, "Do you have the time commitment?" And she said, "Yes." I said, "Then I can make you good at it." And we just slowly but surely went through everything. And by the time we were like 6 weeks into the semester, I said, "Here's the logins. You've got this. Just if you have questions, let me know." And it just was this process of teaching and getting them to understand and providing some oversight and not just accountability, but support.
Yes.
And, it's fine. And so I think that that's something a lot of times like a lot of streamers and content creators in particular who it's just a solo they have a solo mindset with it. And really it takes a village to do a lot of this well. You've got to really back in the day that was talking about networking. You got to
Oh,
network with
yeah,
other
yeah, yeah.
people. Yeah, yeah. Well, what it really is you just need to surround yourself with people who are going to cheerlead you and be willing to help you because like every streamer's got their own thing going on and you need to ultimately, like I've watched a lot of streamers fail because they weren't willing to ask for help.
Mm.
And not with the content, because the content's good. Like they didn't need help with any of that. But in order to grow, they needed somebody who was willing to help. And so somebody to clip stuff, to upload that to Instagram and YouTube and everywhere else. All those different things are really, really crucial. And when you're just trying to do it yourself, you fail. And you look at the big streamers, Christian or not, the big streamers have a
Oh, whole team. Absolutely.
whole team
The
of
bigger
people
the,
who are
the
doing
bigger they
stuff
are,
for
the bigger their team has to be.
yeah,
They
yeah.
they can't do it themselves.
They have paid mods, can you imagine your job being a moderator? Like, that's crazy, but I know some really big streamers who have 2 or 3 mods that are paid mods, like full-time salary. That's crazy.
Man, I need to find one of those gigs.
I know, right? Yeah.
That'd be fantastic being a paid mod. I would love that.
Or awful, or awful.
Well,
Yeah, ruin the Twitch experience. But, it just they have whole teams of people who clip stuff and caption stuff for them, and yeah, it just becomes something that's really, really crucial. So when you're ministry minded and you're trying to grow a ministry and there's people who really believe in you and your ministry, partner with people and say, "Hey, you may not have any money, but do you have time? And do you have
yes.
talent?
Yeah.
And would you be willing to help me grow this?
Yeah.
And I will shout you out and say you're awesome all the time." And that's all I can offer you. But there I think a lot of streamers would be surprised, particularly amongst like folks that are really dedicated to what they're doing, what they could accomplish if they just asked for help.
Yeah, and I one of the interesting things too is when you are new and getting started, there are people ready to jump in and help you. And was fascinating to me was when because I hung out in several communities, and then people kept asking when I was going to stream, and I finally said, "Hey, I'm going to." I had a couple people that said, "Hey, can we mod for you?" Immediately. They wanted to volunteer to do that, which was great because I wasn't ready to ask anybody because I'm like, why would I expect you to come and mod for me? You don't even know what I'm going to do. You don't even know if I'm going to be any good. You know, who knows if this is a short term? We're going to try it. It's going to fail. And I'm going to say, see, I told everybody, so I'm not a streamer. Let me get out of here and not do that. But the other hand, they only were able to serve for a season. Their life changed, situation changed. They could no longer serve as a mod. So when they left, it was like, I need someone who's here all the time, who do I see engaging and who do I see skills in. I don't know if you use this language, I love this language. I see in you conversation. So
Mm,
I see that you are here all of the time. I see that you are welcoming when people come in. You're always having conversations with people. I would love for you to be able to be a mod for me. And that's all I'm going to ask you to do is continue to do those things you're already doing. And so like I love those I see in you conversations. It helps people to see they can do it when you tell them what you see them doing.
mhm, yeah. And that's what we do. That's what a good leader does in the IRL space. You know,
Yes.
they are constantly be like, "Hey, I see this in you. I recognize this talent." I do that with my students all the time, and so it's just one of those things that I feel like we don't bring into this space as much as we could. I don't know why that is. I don't know. I'm not sure if it's because we feel so siloed or because it's all online or something like that. But I've just personally found that, just talking with people and asking for their help. Like for example, I don't have a lot of branding expertise and branding knowledge, and I know people who do. And
Mm,
so I have been reaching out to them and say, "Hey, can I borrow an hour of your time? And can you show me how I need to set up like a branding template and some of these different things? Can you look at some of this for me? Can you help me?" You will know what? Every single person said yes. Like no one said, I don't want to help him. And I think it's like utilizing the resources and the people that you know around you to build something out that you're really proud of. That's kind of where I'm at in my content journey right now. I've been making content as the guiding lantern for a year almost in June. And now I'm like, okay, well, I probably need to really consider making sure that my branding is very good across all platforms. Like it was okay, but now like really I'm pushing. I want it to be consistent. I want to have fonts and colors that are represent my brand completely. And those are the ones I consistently use. I have a way that I lay things out. I have an actual logo instead of just random lanterns.
right, right.
And like all of those different things. And so I'm kind of in this leveling up, if you will, journey of everything that I've been doing. And a lot of that's been asking people who know a lot of this branding stuff way better than me, how I do that and what tools that they use. And, you know, it's been really, really good to be vulnerable and to ask for help. Like so many people just don't ask for help.
Yeah, and I love the community that's developing, and we'll get into this talking. We've met at cons before. We'll talk a little bit in that direction of the Christian community that's here, where people want to share, they want to help, they want to see you succeed just as much. But on the rebranding, the question was whether or not I've had a rebrand. Well, this podcast has had a rebrand. So to begin with, like it was not designed to let's spend a lot of time thinking about a brand and put it out there. It was more of the Church Digital, which I work with and help with, and I'm in gaming. Not everyone there is. We have a channel that we did a couple of series of podcast on, and we're not using the Church Digital channel on Twitch. Do you want to do something with it as our gaming person? And so we did some brainstorming around that. It was like, yeah, let's see if a podcast will work. And I'll bring people on. We'll talk about what they're doing. We'll get excited about that. So the name, if you were here a year ago, was the Church Digital Gaming Outpost podcast. Like that, it tells you absolutely nothing unless you're inside the organization. Like inside language, that made sense. It was not branding from that standpoint. So we rebranded in January this year. And I love the rebrand. We spent some time processing through that. We used some old colors and fonts we'd used for our conference, so we repurposed that. So it stays within the Church Digital framework, but it's unique in its own little area on the side. And Control Alt Redeem, I just like, the more I hear it, the more I love that. It's like I use it all over the place. For myself, I didn't start with Flat Cap Dapper Pastor on Twitch. I started out with another name that was the gamer name that I used with my kids whenever we played games. And I accidentally misspelled it when I set up to begin with. And I'm like, oh, this is awful. And I've messed this up. Later, I learned it's like, that really would not have been a good game. It didn't age well. So, so the origin of it was not what people thought of, and they didn't know the origin story. So I'm like, wow, God protected me from having that awful name. And then when I decided I was going to move in the direction of streaming, and before that, actually, I went through trying to figure out what streamer name would I have, and worked on Flat Cap Dapper Pastor, and because I wanted Flat Cap in there, and I also wanted people to know I was a pastor, because what I've had multiple times in life is conversations with people. They don't know you're a pastor. Suddenly they find out you're a pastor, and it feels to them like you bait and switch them. You snookered them into it. And I'm like, I'm not doing this online. I know I'm not, like I don't want that. That's the thing I will not. But I also don't want to take myself too seriously. So, that's like, the dapper is tongue in cheek. It really is.
Sure.
And it's like, so I'm poking fun of myself a little bit, which I like to do. But people will say, yeah, you are dapper. I go, no, it's just the flat cap. Like, take the flat cap away. I'm not dapper at all. I'm just a pastor. That's what you're left with. So.
Yeah.
But that's about what I've done for rebrand. The Church Digital, we've done a couple of rebrands. So our logo is different than what it used to be. So, but what you want with it, this is what the thing I will say. When you hit the right thing, and you can have modifications, like the Pepsi logo has gone through modifications, so people still know it's Pepsi. They've stuck to their colors, they've moved some things around. But the Nike swoosh has become so ingrained in culture, it no longer has to say Nike next to it.
Yeah, it's just the swoosh.
It's just the swoosh. So when you can, but you have to take the time to have both things before you can, deconstruct it to just, all you need is a swoosh and everyone knows it.
Yeah. And it's just like, people don't understand. Like, I see so many people trying to, they want to stream. And they want it to be, they maybe don't want it to be huge, but they want it to be good, right? And they don't do the things that would make it good. And that actually drives me mad. Whenever I knew I wanted to do this, and I really felt called to do this, one of the things that I knew immediately was that if you go and look at the other Tavern Core creators, they have really nice sets.
Yeah.
I cannot halfway do this.
Right.
And so I was like, well, I got to fund this somehow. And so I took about 65% of my video game and novel collection. I sold it, and I used that money to fund it, because I didn't want it to come out. A little bit came out of our normal budget, but I didn't want, because this thing right here was not super cheap. Okay. And I had to fund it somehow. And I don't regret it. It was totally worth it. And the second I started making content, it actually caught people's attention, because I knew my audience, and I knew what I was going for, and I knew what I had to have. And so, so many content creators, if you're an aspiring creator out there, you feel like you're just kind of stuck. Like, what do you need to do to level up how it looks and how it feels, right? Maybe you have a nice microphone and a camera, and that's great. Those foundations are incredibly important. But if you don't have good branding, and you don't think about how your lighting looks on your stream, and you don't have, like, you got your caps behind you, and that, like, totally, like, that's perfect. But if you're just like generic gaming setup person, that doesn't say anything to people about who you are. And you just got to really think about like, what do I want to get across? I got to give a shout out to my friend Pastor Dustin,
Oh
Dustin.
yeah.
He has the coolest setup behind him
Yes,
of
he does.
any Christian streamer I know. And it's incredible. And this is what happens. It actually creates this interesting curiosity gap with people who would potentially come in because they see pastor in his name and then they click in and they see, whoa, this guy has like this epic setup behind him and he's a pastor. Like, what is this? And so it creates this curiosity gap. And then you have the fact that he's on there reading scripture with all this cool gamer stuff behind him and this beautiful, amazing, well lit setup. And it tells a story. Like the whole content from the name to the setup to all of it tells a story and it's all intentionally done. And so when you're thinking about that as a creator, maybe you don't have the budget or the money to create some massive, awesome, beautiful space, but like thinking about how the viewer experience, how they experience your world and your lore and whatever you've got going
Yeah,
on,
yeah.
having it be something that's really cohesive and well thought out, I think is really, really important. It's like this for any business, any ministry, any organization. They're always thinking about branding and how they look and how they feel and what story they're telling through their branding. And I just think that that's something that's really, really important for creators to think about more than anything else. Like they just focus on, well, I engage a lot with chat. Well, that's great. Do you have people to chat with? Do they stick around? Why or why not? Look at the analytics. Like all those different things. It's tough. It's not easy, but if you want to do it, you've got to actually do it.
Oh yeah. Well, and there are certain things like you need to settle on what's the priority. So for a streamer getting started, it depends on what their genre is, where they're going, what's the priority. For people who are getting started, I always say microphone is the highest priority because if you don't have good quality sound, no one's going to listen to you. No one's going to stay. Like my setup has changed multiple times. I've also because I love change. Okay. So I have probably been in this room and not kept the same angle and setup for more than 6 months. I will change it again in 6 months. It's just I'll slide the angle slightly different. I like that change in my life and those kinds of things. But now the hats are a feature and they will stay in some
Sure.
capacity.
It's part of who you are.
Right. But you're jumping into, you know, the tavern scene. If you did not invest in that tavern behind you, then are you really jumping into that category? Are you? No, you're not.
Mm-mm.
So, and I'm not jumping into the gamer category either. So I'm in the just chatting category for the bulk of what I do. I'm in now reading and learning the Bible category. Those categories aren't looking for all the gamer stuff behind me. I do have a little bit, hidden in there and whatnot, but it's not the big portion of what I do. So I'm trying to match a different audience. So I love that aspect of who is your audience that you're trying to reach? What is it you're trying to bring and do all those things? I will say this, if anyone else is trying to go in the tavern direction there and they need a big chunk of wood like that, if you have Amish that live anywhere near you, they probably have a sawmill and you can go buy live edge wood from them pretty cheap because they don't have a business, expense and all of those things. They're running it for themselves. So any income is going to be additional surplus. So my daughter has done that before because she lived by the Amish. My mom lives by the Amish. So she's actually thinking of taking a tree that fell down in her yard over to them, having them cut that tree so she can use it to make a floor for her porch that I built last year. So she's thinking about that. So if you have
Yeah.
Amish near you, you can lower that cost. If you don't, I'm sorry, you're going to pay a whole lot to get live edge.
Yeah. One of the things about it is like in doing this, I mentioned asking for help being really, really crucial.
Yes.
We looked online for forever to try to come up with something that we could do, like something we could just buy. It was like a kitchen island or something like that. And I'm like, none of it. I knew none of it was right. None of it was going to fit what we needed to do. And so there's a guy at the church that we attend locally who does woodworking, all those different things. And so I went up to him one day and I said, hey, I have this project. What do you think it would cost? Would you be willing to help? And once he realized what I was trying to do, he's like, that sounds awesome. I am totally in. When I said I needed to make a rolling, basically tavern bar because all of this is on wheels, it moves back and forth. And he was like, yeah, we can do it. We can do it. And he took his expertise in woodworking and said, well, you need this and you need this. Do you want shelves underneath? How are we going to make it look on the outside? We want to have a nice top that looks really cool,
Yeah.
which was the most expensive part, that
Oh, I
piece
know.
of
I
wood
knew it
right there.
was. I knew that was the most expensive part. Yep.
Most expensive part. And the shelves. So we bought one big piece of wood and he turned it into the bar top and those shelves that you see behind me. And using using his expertise was excellent. Like I told him the vibe that I was going for. He understood it completely. He's like, "Yeah, we can do it." Now I had to pay in this particular case, but he did give me the church friend
Yeah.
discount, but
Yeah.
I definitely paid it for his time. But it was one of those things where like using using the resources around me and really thinking about it and what you want to do. I just think it's really crucial. Like I don't ever want to discourage people from streaming and making content and all those different things. But if you actually want to grow
Oh, yeah.
and do something and reach people, you've really got to think about how does this look? How does this feel? And constantly assess
Yes.
and not obsess about it, not obsess about it, but assess, okay, what are some changes that I could make? If you have somebody who you really feel like you can trust, maybe a longtime viewer, a longtime friend who's also a creator, like what sucks about my stream? What sucks about my content? What do I really need to improve? What grates on your nerves that you are afraid to tell me about? And let them do it. Let them be brutally honest in love. Pick somebody you can trust here and let them do it and make the changes. Just do it. And you'll be happier. And I can guarantee you that you'll feel better about what you're trying to do because ultimately there's so much competition in this space now. It's
Right.
streaming, content creation. And if you aspire, if you're a hobbyist, you just do it for fun, you've got a few friends, a few viewers, a few subs, you're happy. Like just keep doing what you're doing. But if you actually want it to grow a little bit more, if you're a Christian, who is trying to use content to really reach people, specifically to evangelize, then you've got to do things to actually get them into your stream to be evangelized. Otherwise, you're wasting your time.
Yeah, absolutely. There and I think going back there as we've had having this, there's different levels of here's certain some things that you need to have to get started, but there's also stuff that you will not know until you do it. And I definitely don't want to discourage someone from trying, but you need to go in with the expectation of I don't have it all figured out yet, so I'm going to be learning what works and what doesn't work. That's one reason why to go back to the conversation about did I rebrand? Oh, absolutely, I rebranded. I didn't spend the time and energy coming up with the podcast name. I needed to figure out how to do a podcast. I
Mhm.
needed to figure out could I do a podcast? I needed to figure out did I want to do it? So it was I'm going to get started. I'm going to get 10 of these recorded. I'm going to do them on Twitch. And then I'm going to evaluate is this good? Am I enjoying it? Do my guests enjoy it? Do the people watching it enjoy it? Okay, now what do I do? Okay, so now let's go put those out there on YouTube. Then it was do that for a while. And now it's like, okay, now we're going to move it to another level. I'm going to move to Spotify. I'm going to move to Apple. And so it's a constant evolving thing of take the one thing I can do, figure this piece out, and then move to another thing so that I can grow. And what do I need to learn to grow and move in other areas? And there's still plenty of things I don't have right. Like I still can't get my lighting good. I really wish I had more help with lighting, but I also have glasses that reflect horribly. And so there's this constant battle. Yeah, yep,
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
The constant battle of to look better on lighting, I end up with more glare. So where's the trade-off there?
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a constant assessment. Again, it's not obsessing, but assessing regularly
Yes.
what you really need to do, what you need to do better, and just being open to hearing critical feedback. Like that's a process I'm going through right now. is I've had some people really build me up, say, I really like this, and this is what you're doing really well. I'm turning around and talking to somebody else who I can trust. I'm like, okay, where are my gaps? What am I missing here to do better? And getting some of that done so that I can take the next steps forward. Like I ultimately don't know what God wants with this, like long term, but I do know I feel very keenly aware that I need to push a little bit more. Like it's time to push, it's time to work on being better, all those different things. To not rest on what I've been doing so far and just leave it there. And so that's kind of the process that I'm in right now.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. I love that. So the focus right now for you is in the direction of this. So you've been doing it about a year. The tavern vibe. So that isn't live content. That's not Twitch content. That's all pre-recorded, edited down. Are you going through the process of writing your script? So you're reading a script, or you're memorizing it? What's your and we'll come back to some other things on Twitch, but I just want to kind of like we've already moved in that direction.
Process.
So let's
Yeah.
yeah, what's your process for doing that?
So for the short form video, which is what I've been doing for the most part for the last year, my process has been I take a concept or I hear what somebody else did. I'm like, oh, I could put my own spin on that. I write out a script. I have a format for this script. Like I literally have like it's just like a speech or a
Yeah.
message or anything. It's just really refined for 60 seconds. I have the hook, I have the twist, I have the moral, I have the ending.
Okay.
And it's literally written out in those. And they're all PowerPoints that I've done. So look, for example, let me grab something right behind me. I was at half price books over the weekend. They had books for 20% off because it's the Memorial Day weekend, and I was looking through all their leadership stuff, and I picked up a book. I've never read this book. I've never looked at this book. I have no idea if it's good, but I just grabbed it. The Leadership Challenge. I don't know who wrote it, anything about it, but I looked through it. I was like, okay, I see lots of headlines. I see lots of like good ideas here. And so what I will do is I will start reading through this book and I will highlight things and take pictures of everything that I feel like I could turn into good guiding lantern content. And then I will take that and I will think about, okay, how do I give this a fantasy spin, a D&D spin, those kinds of things? How do I talk about I use the phrase your party. I use a lot of Dungeons and Dragons language. So, you know, if it's for example, recently I talked about someone who wanted to lead and they really didn't want to take the hits. And so I'm like,
Mm,
like, if you're going to be a paladin and lead the party and you're not willing to take a hit, like, yeah, you're not
yeah.
good. And this is why. And so I decide like where I want to go with it. And then I write it all out. And then this is why I actually incorporate a little bit of AI into my process. I have taken all of my Guiding Lantern content and I've created an AI agent that knows the Guiding Lantern
Okay.
content really, really well. And I'll say, okay, here's all my ideas for this video. Does this feel right? Does this look good? Does this follow what we have determined works really
Mm-hmm.
well? And it will make recommendations on what to adjust. And then I throw it all into a PowerPoint. It's nice and big. I have a nice big 29, not 29, yeah, 29-inch monitor right here in front of me, and I will throw it all up onto a PowerPoint. I set up my camera or my phone on a tripod, mic myself up, change into the tavern stuff. I record it all back there and then upload it, edit, add some music. I use right now I use Opus Clip to add the captions, and then I put it up. That's the process over and over and over every week. I've been expanding into long form content, which was one of the things when I was at the Nerd Culture Ministry Summit, I was challenged to do. And one of about that, the big challenge, but how do I take what I'm doing here and turn it into long form content? What does it actually look like? How does that work? I've experimented with a couple of different things. Some of them have been more successful than others, but right now I'm just like, I've just got to repeatedly make good long form content.
Right.
And that, mm, I'm gonna say I got a hot take. Are you ready for my hot
Yeah,
take?
yeah, go for it.
I think making long form content on YouTube is way harder than streaming. Way harder than streaming. I part of me was like, oh man, I could just stream and sit there and play a game. Like, no, I've gotta edit and thumbnails and audio mixing and all of those things. I'm glad to hear that that's not a hot take in the chat.
Yeah, yeah, that's not a hot
But
take.
it's just and part of me doesn't want to do it. But I know that if I want to grow, ultimately that's what I've got to learn. And so, trying to figure that out and make that work and work well is where I'm at now. And so I'm using a lot of different tools. I'm like learning about different tools to help me. YouTube has inside of it this whole thing called Ask Studio, which I think I haven't been able to quite figure it out because they don't really say, but I think it's a shard of their version of Gemini, which is their large language model on
Okay.
Google.
I've not
And
seen that.
it's one that's in there that is specifically knows your channel and your content.
Okay.
And so I can actually have I can have a conversation inside of my YouTube studio with Gemini ultimately, and it knows everything. It knows every single one of my videos, which is really, really cool. And I can say, okay, what do you think I ought to make a video on next? Where should we go with this next? What thing has resonated? And it actually will take where watch time has been higher in videos and where like people maybe commented or said something somewhere and say, okay, someone said this like 3 months ago on one of your shorts. Maybe you could turn that into a long form video. Here's a recommendation of an outline. And I'm like, oh, this is what I'm going to do. So that's where I have been going. I have a list of ideas that I've come up with on my own, but I'm also utilizing that tool and asking, okay, what do you think I ought to do?
Okay.
Where should we go next? And it's been really, really helpful in ideation. And so I write out a script. I'm shooting for about 10 minutes. I know how many words a 10-minute YouTube video will end up becoming.
Right.
And so trying to make that interesting, trying to figure out how to make a talking head, because that's what I am. I'm a talking head creator. How to make that interesting. What is it going to look like to add B-roll to that someday? Like so many different things. And I am way out of my comfort zone with all of this because because I just don't know. Like I can talk to a screen. I talk to students and teach all day. I've preached. I've done all that kind of stuff. I can talk to a camera all day long, but to make it interesting to be watched for 10
Right.
minutes or even 6 minutes, that's the real challenge.
Yeah. Like I've had a lot of people on here. You're sharing new stuff that I don't know, which is fantastic because we're always learning if we're listening. And the conversation in chat has been really good too, aside from, the commenting on lights and glare and baby powder and all of that stuff, which if you weren't here, you missed it. I'm not going to repeat it. You had to be here for it. So I love doing those teases like that. Sorry if you weren't in the chat, you didn't get to see it, but there's cool stuff that's happening. Like you're saying, doing B-rolls, doing that. I only just started that last month. Like I started trying to I had to do this, then I had to add that. Now I'm doing this. Like I am probably doing, I would say time-wise, the same amount of time editing my stuff now that I was a year ago. And I have improved my capacity to do the editing, and I have
Mhm.
improved the things that I am putting in there and having all those things together. But I wanted to go back to the idea creation piece because you were
Mhm.
saying you're utilizing a tool to do it, but what you also were doing is you just picked up a book.
Mhm.
So you are using anything at your disposal to try and say, is there something of value in here that I can find that is a grain of truth to share in a 60-second thing and give out to people? So, and then put my flair on it, put my taste on it, put my, you know, labeling or, all of my branding in this so that it comes across from in a place where people aren't going to find it otherwise. Because the people that are watching you aren't picking up that book and reading it.
No, they're not. So, for example, I don't know if I'm a big I guess I'm a big John Maxwell fan. I've always
Oh,
have been.
yeah.
He's a
I've seen
leader.
him.
For those of you who don't know, big leadership guru, all those different things. he's a thought leader in that area. I have read all of his books. Some of them are better than others. Some of them are stinkers. Well, not stinkers. They're just boring and don't say a lot.
Some of them are,
Some of they are repeats.
they're repeats.
But I have a lot of his books, and some of them are very good. And I was looking at, okay, he wrote the 17 indisputable laws of teamwork.
Yes.
And so I'm like, okay, well, I am going to take all of those 17 laws and I'm going to make 17 short form videos.
There you go.
On each one. I'm like, teamwork. So you got your party composition. You got the are the cleric and the rogue fighting. How do we help with that? My dream, and this is a long-term dream. I don't know if you've ever read Patrick Lencioni before.
Yeah.
You read Patrick Lencioni?
Absolutely.
So he has 5. He writes leadership fables, is what he calls them. And so they are books that are written around some sort of business or office setting or whatever, and they teach leadership concepts. I someday, and I'm not starting on it yet, but someday I want to write a fantasy version of that, like a fantasy novel that teaches these leadership concepts. That is something that I feel like could do really well with how much fantasy has erupted in the cultural zeitgeist recently.
Yes.
Between, it really started, honestly, what's interesting is it, obviously Lord of the Rings and Chronicles of Narnia and things like that. And then you had with Stranger Things, Dungeons and Dragons become really, really popular again. And then you have, and I fully understand what it is, okay? You have the romantasy genre, which don't read most of that, okay? But it's really, really popular now. And people like dragons and swords and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm thinking to myself, well, what if we actually just started teaching leadership concepts in this whole vein, using all of this language? And so now I am, every time I'm reading anything, I'm looking up anything, I'm looking for books, or I just come across something else that was by Patrick Lencioni on TikTok or whatever. I'm like, okay, I'm going to save that and I'm going to re-listen to that transcript. And then I am going to absolutely translate that into what I'm doing. And then on top of that, we're also looking for the fun trending stuff. So that's part of the whole TikTok and YouTube zeitgeist, is that you've got trending sounds, you've got trending like memes and different things, music out there. And I'm like, okay, I need to use some of that. And I got to make sure I don't go outside the brand and what I'm doing, because there's something silly and fun that I can do to make things more interesting. So on TikTok back last fall, there's this song that got really, really popular called Turn the Lights Off. And anytime you were on TikTok and YouTube for a while, you would see this video of, and this sound, it's like this like club music, drum and beat sort of thing. And some of you already know what I'm talking about. And I was like, okay, how do I translate that into a Guardian Lantern video that would be really, really fun? And so I have a bunch of lights that are strung up that I don't always turn on that'll flash and things. And so I had that music come up and I had a caption pop up on the screen that said, this is what happens when the bard that you hired casts dancing lights, which is a cantrip in Dungeons and Dragons. And I had the music going and I was dancing and doing all those fun things while it was going and the lights were flashing. And I used that trending sound inside of the world and the lore that I have built here. And it did really, really well for me. And so I don't want my entire brand to be that, but once in a while I'll find something that's super fun or funny or interesting to me. And I'm like, I'm going to just make something silly and fun. Well, it's just going to help grow the audience even more.
Right. And the connecting piece there, though, is it did have a hook into the lore. So you were able to bring something from outside in by having that connection piece. And I think that's the thing that is crucial, because otherwise it looks like you're pandering. And if you're going to just pander to every trend that's happening, that's not going to get you an audience that's going to stick with you. So that but a one-off like that gives homage to the current trend while staying true to brand. What a beautiful way to be able to bring that in. That's the thing. Like I never know the current trends. Like I am so out of I'll say this. 35 years ago, I knew all of the current trends because, I was in the middle of setting all of the current trends. In fact, I was often ahead of trends. Like I was listening to grunge in Seattle 6 months before anyone knew who Nirvana was.
Oh, nice.
Okay. So I got on that train after Alice in Chains and went down that early 90s before anybody knew that. Oh, and by the way, when I was in high school, I was wearing flannel and nobody was wearing flannel yet. Like, I seriously was like 2 or 3 years ahead of the grunge scene without even being connected in any way. So once
Yeah.
it was there, it was just happening. But how my friend and I ended up in that space is we would go into the backup of an album and read who influenced the band. When the band would
Mhm.
say who influenced them, we'd go search for those other bands, and then we would find those and see who they had. So we're searching these people out by the back of album covers that would tell you who they were listening to. But there's too much to consume as far as social media. So it's like
There is.
it's hard for me to be that up to date on things as I used to be.
And I have to be careful. There are periods of time where I won't, besides my own content, even spend any time on
Oh,
TikTok or YouTube.
yeah.
Shorts, particularly. I spend a lot of time on YouTube proper. In fact, that's where I do most of my most of what I watch is YouTube. And so like YouTube proper, I'll do that. But shorts and TikToks and things like there'll be weeks where I don't watch a whole lot besides my own stuff because like you can just get sucked into that doom scroll
Oh,
rabbit
right,
hole and just
right.
go forever.
Back
And
to what you were saying about intentionality. Like
yeah, yeah.
you
Mhm.
being intentional with your media consumption is also an important thing to be doing.
But yeah, but one of the things I have found is when I find that sweet spot of here's what's trending, here's what's interesting. I spend a little bit of time like commenting on people that I follow every day because you just have to grow in that space. And so I'll do a little bit of that. But like beyond that, like some people scroll for forever and they shouldn't do that. But if I want to grow in that space and be involved in that space, it's like this ebb and flow and just sometimes I'm too busy and so I just don't worry about it. But what I have found ultimately, just to kind of go back to where we were talking about, is that using some of those trending pieces has been really, really valuable. And people have stuck around for the other stuff that's
Yeah.
even more important to me. And the other thing about the trending stuff is it's fun. It makes it like people who see that realize, oh, well, this person's not taking themselves that seriously. They're here having fun like the rest of us. Plus, it stretches those creative muscles a little bit
Yeah.
if you have a particular genre that you play into or a niche that you're really focusing on. How do I take what's trending and express that through my niche? I think is something that is really, really important. That's why having a brand and a niche and like understanding what you're really trying to do is crucial because then everything you do through that gets
Yes.
flavored and filtered through it. But yeah, I read a lot. The Guiding Lantern would not exist without a lot of reading. I will admit the last year I have used and utilized a lot of the things I've done in the classroom, teaching different books and things on
Mhm.
leadership. I've utilized a lot of those, but I'm getting to the point now where I've got to start going past that because I've honestly used up for the last
Well,
year a lot of my PowerPoints.
well, let me give you a couple of suggestions that I'm going to guess are books that are so old that maybe you've never heard of them.
I'm here for it.
Lincoln on Leadership.
Lincoln on
Lincoln
leadership.
on
Okay.
Leadership. I believe that's a title. I have to look it up. So I'll double check these after we get off.
It is.
Yep. So it's like each chapter is like 2 to 3 pages. So
Mm.
it's fantastic little principle that I don't know if they're all connected with Lincoln directly or not, but it was a wonderful, wonderful read. I probably read that 30 years ago, something like that. Another one that I just loved was Victory Secrets of Attila the Hun.
That's crazy.
Man, that's such a good book.
Okay.
Those two are fantastic books. Those are probably books that pushed me in the direction of focusing on and studying leadership. And
Mm.
I went to the leadership summit for probably about 10 years. I also hosted the Willow Creek, or sorry, whatever their name is now. You started out as Willow Creek, and then
Mhm.
it shifted off from there. The Global Leadership Summit, that's what it was. Hosting them at my church and going to meet with and do trainings directly, for the churches who were doing that on top of hosting the Leadership Summit. So I've got a lot of books on my shelf from leadership and spent a lot of time focusing on that. So I do love those things. But those are two little quippy books that you could probably take one chapter and do a video per
Mhm.
chapter in those
Yeah,
books. Those would
yeah,
be some fun ones to do. So let me
yeah,
know
that
if you
sounds
do
awesome.
if you do get those and use them. I would love to see those.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And so, like, just figuring out what I wanna do there and coming up with ideas, it takes time, and there are times where I just go into a slump, and I'm like, "Man, I got nothing today."
Uh, yes,
Yeah, I
I
got
know how
nothing
that
today.
is. Yeah.
Particularly, like, balancing a full-time job plus, like, I nearly work, it feels like 2 full-time jobs sometimes, and content creation, it's challenging, so I've had to be really intentional. The last couple of weeks, like, there are seasons where I just do enough to stay a little bit active. Like, I've had to finish up grading for the school year and all the end of the school year activities, that's taken up most of my time, but now we're past that. I'm moving forward, I'm looking through the next 3 months. It's time to push again. And so, there are always seasons like that. But that's honestly the other nice thing about doing YouTube instead of Twitch is that if things are evergreen, so the content's
Yes.
evergreen, it's always there and people are always viewing it. And if I don't get one up today, it's okay. I'm not missing anything. However, at the same time, I don't want to rest on that and get lazy.
Yeah. With posting polished videos, you can go
Mhm.
longer between, and people will still come back looking for you as soon as you post.
Yeah. Mhm.
I have plenty of people that I watch, and it's like they'll go through spurts of they'll put a video out every day of the week. I'll watch them, and then they'll go a week without one. Okay, so I didn't miss anything.
Mhm.
Versus live, that pattern and habit of showing up live when you take too much time off in between, they replace you with someone else that's live at the same time.
Mhm.
There's a different flavor of being a live person. But yeah, to go back to we're talking about doing the content that's live is a whole lot different than doing because right now we're doing this live. I mean, I have in my mind where I'm going to go with this. You don't know where we're going with this,
Sure.
but I will spin off of anything that you bring unique that's different from anyone else that's been on here so I can bring that to people. But we're going to wrap this up at some point, and then I will take this to make the content that goes out, as opposed
Right.
to the other way around of creating what's going to be, thinking through all the process, and then doing the filming and editing later.
Mhm.
The clips that are going to come out of here, I have no idea what clips are going to come out of here. I'll shoot for maybe a dozen clips that will go out on short form content from here. And then there'll be the full length podcast. At some point, I would maybe like to put out some, 8 to 10 minute, really good content summary of the podcast. That's where we
Mhm.
go back to our conversation earlier. If someone wanted to come along and volunteer to do that, that would be great. I can't pay anyone to do it, and I don't have enough bandwidth to do that yet. But down the
Yeah.
road, I think that would still be a viable thing that like, hey, I think this podcast is evergreen content. Anybody can come in, can talk about it, listen to it, get caught up on past episodes, do all of that stuff. But if I were to take the 3 hour, when I do the 3 hour podcast and give you a 20-minute, summary of the whole thing or the highlights of it, I might get more viewers if I move into that area. So
Mhm.
down the road, I'll have I don't know, probably close to episode 75. I don't know what the actual number is, but probably somewhere around there. So I got 75 episodes I can go back and take and make those. That's content waiting to be made that I just have to have the time or get someone to come along who wants to help create that.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, and that kinda brings me to the last thing I'm working on is ultimately, like, somewhere inside of me, and I think part of this ties into teaching as well, I wanna become a thought leader in this space. Like, I wanna be like, I've told people this, and it seems silly, I wanna be the fantasy version of John Maxwell,
Yeah,
right? I wanna be
love
that
that. I
guy. Like,
love
I
that.
wanna be I wanna be a thought leader in this space, and so writing and putting out more blogs. I mean, yeah, blogs are still a thing, surprisingly enough. More short form written content, all of those pieces. That's where I'm recycling things constantly, and that is where I utilize AI to a bigger extent. Is I'll have this long form video. I've already written the script for it. I perfected this script, and I will literally throw it in the cloud, and I'll say, "Hey, take this script and
Oh
turn
yeah.
it into." turn it into a blog
Oh
post for
yeah,
LinkedIn
it's
today.
fantastic
And
for doing that.
it does it, and it's great. That's where I really like to utilize AI a lot more, is when I've already gotten so much stuff done and written, it's taking it and just reformatting it a little bit for somewhere else. And like, that's how you kind of grow. Like for me, and expanding my reach, no one else probably cares about this content here who's a creator, but I'm posting on LinkedIn regularly,
Hmm.
leadership stuff. And it is still fantasy flared. It's not quite as heavy as what goes up on TikTok and stuff, but it's still got a little bit of that fantasy flair. And I'm regularly posting blog posts to LinkedIn on what I'm learning with some discussion questions. And I have a few regular people who engage with me on LinkedIn. And so that's just another element of all of this is, like, for some people who have different like niches or interests or things that they know about, they're content matter experts. I think of our friend Annika.
Yes.
She's a content matter expert on cake making.
Yeah.
Ultimately, she's an incredible cake maker, incredible baker. She could honestly probably teach people how to make cakes and put stuff up on LinkedIn and become this Sherpa of cake makers out there, the shepherdess of, if you will, of cake makers. And like, you are a content matter expert. And so I think like taking that, like, what do you really know a lot about? What do you really, really understand? And using that as a part of your niche. Or what are you learning? Like, what are you learning right now? Gaming and Twitch is kind of the medium that we're using, but people are far more interested in who you are and what you're about and what you believe in and what interests you than they are most of the time the game that you're playing. The game that you're playing is the backdrop.
Right.
They're there for you ultimately. And so thinking about, like, what am I learning? What am I doing? And so if you're not learning, like if you're not picking up books and reading them, and you're not becoming a stronger expert in whatever content interests you, like whatever it is, right? You're not going to be a streamer or a content creator that's interesting to watch, because people want to know who you are, what you're about, what do you know, and how can I connect with you?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think that's really good advice there, thinking through the whole aspect of those things of why would like to turn it a little bit different direction when COVID happened. And like, I'm one of those weird people that was live streaming church worship service 10 years before COVID. So,
Mhm.
so I was already doing that, but I was doing it to reach the people that were already in my church. You know,
Mhm.
they're sick, they're shut-ins, they're snowbirds, they're going south for the winter. How do they stay connected? How do we reach them? You know, kids sick at home, any of those things. But all of a sudden, COVID happens, nobody's in the building, and I'm now competing with every single church in the country. And not only that, I'm competing with all of these pastors who are better preachers than I am. I'm competing with, like, so I was going like, why would somebody want to watch me? Why would
Mhm.
anybody want to watch me? And it's like, it's because of the relationship. It's because of who I am. It's not because you couldn't go somewhere and get a better sermon. You can certainly go places and get a better sermon. I'm not saying I'm bad, but I just know I'm not the greatest that, is out there. There are plenty of other people that are better than me. I'm trying to constantly learn and grow to get better, but I do a certain style that I do, and that's not a flavor for everybody. So why come watch me? And it really is. It's like I have to be who I am for people to come and watch me. If I'm not who I am, they don't want to come and watch me. I can't just go copy, Chuck Swindoll, and people are going to come follow me because I'm copying Chuck Swindoll. No, they want to watch Chuck Swindoll do Chuck Swindoll. My Chuck Swindoll's not that good.
Mhm. Yeah. No, you're right. It's I feel like we keep ourselves so locked into, I'm gonna play a game and I'm gonna commentate on it. And there's always gonna be a piece of that. And that's fun and good and all great. Like, doing that's fine. But if you're not, if you don't have something else to say beyond that,
Right.
people aren't gonna stick around. So like, if you are gonna stream, if that's really what you want to focus on, you've got to think about, what do I actually want to say? What am I going to be about? And plan out your streams. So, this is old school recommendations from way back in the days. Like, okay, here's what I've been learning in my real life every day. I've got a few questions I'm going to throw out to my chat to generate some discussion while we're slaying zombies, right?
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
here's some things that we're going to talk about while we're playing through this big epic RPG or Pocopia or whatever the trending game is that you're playing right
yeah.
now. And people love that. That's ultimately what they stay for. They it's a couple of things. They want to see your reaction. So it depends on the kind of gamer that you are. If you're just playing like PvP stuff, they're gonna see it's all skill based. Are you good at it, or are you so awful it's funny? But if you're playing a lot of story based stuff like I do, they want to see two things. They want to see your reaction to stuff that they've already played. So they want to see how you feel when Aerith dies in Final Fantasy VII.
What?
Uh, Stuff like, yeah, sorry, spoilers. Final Fantasy VII. They want to see how you're going to react to that if you don't know, or whatever game's going on, some big betrayal or some big event. They want to see how you feel about it, and then they just want a window into your life and who
Yeah,
you are about. And building those relationships takes a lot of time. When I was streaming regularly, the biggest, most popular streams that I did were ones where we were doing a lot more connecting
mm,
on what I'm talking about, what I'm going through, than what the chat was, and what the chat was saying than the game. The game was the flavoring, the backdrop, but you know, you've got to become and learn to be an interesting person for people to want to engage. And so that's why reading and learning and having things to
yeah,
actually talk about is really, really crucial. And just to be whatever you're interested in, from sewing to cake making to,
yeah.
building video games. If you like to develop games, you're learning a new skill. Like, people love to talk about that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that's super fun. And the other thing is like you were saying, like talking about what's going on in life. Well, we mentioned it, so we might as well go ahead and talk about it here is going to Nerd Culture Ministry Summit.
Yeah.
So like people love when I'm doing traveling and I tell them I'm going to this conference and we can talk about it beforehand. We can talk about it afterwards. We can talk about what I learned. So were you there in Marble Falls? I'm trying to remember.
I was not.
Okay. I
No,
didn't.
that was the first one I watched, but I
Okay,
was not
okay,
there.
okay.
Yeah.
So you have been to Colorado Springs the last 2 years. So
Mhm.
what was it for you that brought you to wanting to connect and be there? And then what are your takeaways from gathering in person at a conference like that?
I watched the first one in 2023. I think that was the first one. And it actually, the only reason I found out about it was at the time I was homesick. Me and my wife both had COVID. And so we were homesick from work that week. And Pastor Dewson retweeted on Twitter this nerd culture and I clicked onto it to watch it. And I was like, this is cool. Like, I knew Susie, like Pastor Susie. I've been very familiar with him. I followed him for years and years and years now. So very familiar with him and what he is doing. But I didn't realize there was this much larger thing really happening out there. And so I watched every single piece of content they put out in that first one that was down there in Marble Falls. And I said to myself, I'm going to be at the next one. I wanna be there. These are my people. I wanna meet them. And so I got connected with folks through Lux Digital Church. My wife and I have gotten really connected there. And so we started hanging out with them in their Discord channel. And, before you knew it, it was time to buy tickets and commit to go. And so we did it. And being there, it was honestly a little bit surreal, because these are people who I had only ever known online and in online spaces. And I had done that before, right? So I told you I worked
Right,
for
right.
Hitbox, and so I had traveled and met people who I only knew online many times before at this point. But this just felt different because these were people who are really on mission together in various different ways. These are people who, some of them I had spent a considerable amount of time with. In the case of Jade and I had known each other and been friends online for years,
Yeah.
and this was the first time that I ever met him. And so it was just one of those awesome moments. And the content there and what they teach you and the community, it's just really incredible, and it's very, very valuable. Honestly, like the keynotes and the speakers, like all that's great. It's worth the ticket price. What's really worth it is just connecting with
Yeah.
people and taking some time to disconnect from everything else you're doing and connect with people. In CMS, it feels like a family of people that meet together. Yeah, I miss it. I'm ready to go back. We're gonna be in Orlando this next year, so I'm ready for that. I'll actually be able to breathe this time.
Yeah, the mountains are a bit, if you aren't used to walking around there in the lighter air, getting winded and whatnot. So yeah, it will be fun being in Orlando for that. But there is I really loved what they did this year, different from previous years, which was go to a breakout session, go do lunch, come back to the same breakout session,
Mhm,
go further in depth. It was like,
mhm.
okay, I got the learning. Now we're going to go do some application. We're
Yeah,
going to actually show this, not just show examples, but depending on which one you were, is let's find an example from in the room. Let's go deeper. Let's actually see it play out. Let's learn
mhm.
that. So it went from the theoretical learning to the applicational piece of it, which I just thought was great, as opposed to getting multiple learnings, bouncing around and doing another learning. It was take something a deeper level, and I just thought that was super cool this year.
Yeah, I loved that. I felt like I walked away with more tools and more understanding than I did in the previous year. Like, the keynotes are great, and those get you really hyped and inspired and all those things, but the 2 main, like, breakout sessions that I went to, I walked away feeling equipped, like really
Yes.
equipped,
Yeah.
instead of just like blasted with more knowledge. I can go online and look up stuff all day long and like tutorials on how to, but being able to have conversations back and forth with people and hear other people's questions, like I walked away really, like I said, feeling equipped instead of feeling just like I had more information to
Yeah.
hit me with it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree with you, and I'll say this, and I've said it a few times on my own stream. I don't know if I've said it here, but I have gone to Exponential Church Planting Conference probably the last 5 years in Orlando. I have yet to go hear a keynote speaker.
Mm,
I I can get their content anywhere, okay? I do not go to that conference to hear the keynote speaker. I
mhm,
go to have conversations with people of what they're doing and how they're applying it, and go to the breakout sessions where I can engage the person who's teaching it with my own questions so I can grasp it, apply it, and walk away with it. So the keynotes, you're right. The keynotes were great. And at a smaller venue like this, most people are in there, so I don't get stuck outside having a conversation and missing it as easy as often. But
mm,
I did miss a few of the keynotes simply because I was having a great conversation and I didn't want, like, okay, I'm staying where the conversation is. I'm going to join in with this. I love talking with the other sponsors of a conference who are there, or the people who are so trying to sell the stuff at their tables, whatever they're promoting. I love to go to vendors. I love all of the relationship with the I had so many conversations with the vendors that were there. It was
mm.
so much fun to hang out and talk with the vendors, as much as building relationships with people. This is a cool thing that I haven't gotten so much with other conferences yet, but this was the 3rd year for me. So I remember conversations that I had with people, at the first one, talking about where they were, talking about what God was leading them to do, and then seeing them again, and now seeing again for the 3rd time, and trying to stay connected with what they're doing and see where God has brought them, and also see the path that I'm on, and see that, like, we're both paralleling the same thing, and we're growing
Mhm,
at the pace that NCMS is growing. We're being
mhm,
fed by NCMS and others, but we're growing in a way, NCMS is growing in a way, and then new people are coming in, which are growing this even bigger. It was just really, really cool vibe to be able to have that with a couple of people that have been there from the very first one, and watch that life growth happening on someone who's paralleling what you're doing.
yeah, I that part to me, I think is the coolest thing. So when we went to NCMS 2024, we were on the road heading there, and I said to my wife, I was like, "I really want to do this." I pitched her this whole idea on the
Uh-huh,
road.
uh-huh.
I said, "This is what I wanna do. How do you feel about it? What do you think about it?" She just immediately started to write up, "How do I make a brick wall?" A fake brick wall, and she's like, "I guess we're doing this," and that started there. I started to actually verbalize some of the concepts I was thinking about. So, we talked about early on learning from a video game and actually learning a leadership principle from a video game. That is one of the first places I actually felt comfortable verbalizing and ideating around a breakfast table. Hey, here's some of what I think about I want to do. And I was able to get live feedback from people. People like, oh, that sounds really cool. How are you going to do it? I said, well, hopefully by the time we come back next year, I'll have done it. And by the time we got to the last year's NCMS 2026, I had done it. I'd started, I was doing it, we were going, and I learned a little bit more. And when we go to 2027, I hope to be just a little bit bigger and a little bit better and like all those different things. And you're right, we do really, this is one of the cool things about this particular conference, and it's more than a conference. I like how they use the word collective because I think that's actually truer language.
Yeah.
Um, as each of the groups inside of this collective grow, we all grow.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we all have opportunities together. There's some things locally I hope to be doing with Love Thy Nerd in the next couple of years right here in the Kansas City area. And like that connection, like that wouldn't be happening unless I had this connection here and we're all
Oh,
gonna
right.
grow
Right.
together. Like I have made a really good friend. His name is Mike Wilson, locally here in the Kansas City area, that I met through the being on the NCMU podcast. He found me on the podcast and realized I was local. And so now I've made this local
Oh, that's
friend
super
and
cool.
like he does some stuff with Love Thy Nerd. And I'm like, yes, this is so really, really, really cool. And not to mention just the connections with people I know, right? The connections with people through Lux and through other like streamers in this area. Like I have made lifelong friends, like people who I want to see become successful in whatever they are, whatever they're doing. And we're in it together.
Yeah.
Like we're really all in it together and it feels that way. And I think that that's one of the coolest things about Nerd Culture Ministry Summit in particular.
Yeah, and another piece of it too for people who we're on Twitch, your Twitch people. This isn't just Twitch people. This is anything nerdy. So you're
Mhm.
doing tabletop games. Like there's people doing tabletop game ministry. You're
Mhm.
going. You're a proprietor of a board game establishment. Like you're there. Like yes, it is content creators, but it's more than that. It's
Yeah,
broader.
way more.
It's any genre that you can get nerdy about and you just love, there's people that are within the Nerd Culture Ministry Collective, which is the gathering of people. The summit
Yeah.
is the when we get together in one place and we learn and
Yeah.
grow and share. So if you're interested in that, check it out.
Yeah. And one of the things I think is really cool is like that's really crucial. Like what you just said is crucial. My friend Giles, he lives in Colorado. He does tabletop local and ministers to people doing local
Yeah.
tabletop.
Yep.
We get together and we talk, and I'm excited about what he's doing and he's excited about what I'm doing, and we've connected some online, and I'm just like, yes, I love it. I love it so much. And then like truly connections with people. Like I I now know the content director for the Bible app, the YouVersion Bible app, and I've been working with them on some possibly doing some cool things. Like she said to me, "Hey, what would it look like for Doc, the character I play, to be on the Bible app
Yeah.
teaching leadership concepts?" I'm like, "Okay, maybe we could talk about this, you know?" And I'm just like, it's just so cool and it's fun.
Yeah.
That's the other thing about it is like it's a ministry. There's a lot of work involved. There's a lot of stretching involved, but man, it's fun. It fulfills that creative side of me of doing something interesting and neat.
Mhm.
It's not just like I could have just wrote another book. I mean, my dissertation was on servant leadership, and maybe someday I'll write a book on servant leadership. But I didn't want to write another book. I didn't just want to write a book, you know? I wanted to do something that was different and sure a book would be meaningful, but this is more meaningful to me.
It also is in a place where people aren't getting leadership and
Mhm.
you're reaching people that will never read a book on servant leadership.
Yeah.
So, and plus, I probably have half a dozen books on servant leadership. So I'm probably going to go, well, I don't need another one.
Mhm.
So, but what you're doing, I'm like, I don't know anyone doing that. I'm interested in that. I want to see what you can do with that. I want to see how you bring that into the space. And so, yeah, and it is just fun to see what God is up to. And I think that's part of the camaraderie that we have is a kinship. There are like-minded people out there in the Christian community, trying to do things God's calling them to, and our local congregation may not understand that. We're a little bit too much out of the norm for
Mhm.
them to embrace us. So we have to have a different way to establish a network and be brought together. That's why we probably are so encouraged to watch each other. We're not jealous of the, oh, I wish I, we might have the, oh, I wish I were doing that, but we're still genuinely happy every time someone else is doing it. Like all of a sudden
Mhm.
somebody makes partner on Twitch. We're like ecstatic. Yeah, awesome,
Yeah, this is
fantastic.
awesome.
Can't wait to see what God does with you now. Somebody reaches a new milestone on YouTube, subs or whatever they're doing. Like fantastic.
Yeah.
I can't wait to see you do more. I just don't have big ones, but it's like in the podcast area, I'm looking at my numbers and going, well, you know what? Spotify's telling me in the niche area of streamers my size, podcasters my size, I'm doing okay compared to them. I don't compare myself to other people. I'm striving towards things, looking at my numbers and going, wow, I've made this much progress in this much time. I'm doing some good things. And I can celebrate those with other people and share my numbers and say, hey, look what I was able to get to. And here's the time frame. So it's fun to celebrate other people and be encouraged by them, because watching someone else grow, I think, inspires me to strive to do more. That when you're serving in a local church and you're worried about how many people are in the church next door and are we bigger than them? And if we're going to do something in town, are our people going to go to their thing or our thing? Like
Mhm.
we're starting with the wrong place.
Yeah.
And I think right now in the networking, there's a lot more camaraderie. There's a lot more celebrating and encouragement among each other in the Christian nerd culture set than we have, wanting to have only selfishness and see ourselves
Mhm.
succeed.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And it's a mindset thing, and I'm sure, like, we all have to work through those things, but we all come at it from a place of hopefully a being sanctified mindset.
Uh,
No one's perfect yet.
right.
So we're all approaching this from a being sanctified mindset, and we're all coming at it from the perspective of wanting to celebrate those things. And so, yeah, it's just a totally different feeling, like a vibe, as they say.
Yeah.
Um, like I went to all these other conferences and did these other cool things in the past, but nothing's like going to NCMS in my opinion.
Yeah.
And having that connection to people daily, honestly, outside of the conference itself.
Uh, yeah. And I would say one other thing that I'm really happy with the new location, and I'm not going to spill that because I don't know if it's been announced and any of that stuff. So if
No, it hasn't. Just
okay,
Orlando.
yeah, just Orlando. But if you know, you know. But the staying on site is such a beautiful thing. Being able to now in Marble Falls, we were at hotels that were right next to the church for the most part, so we could
Mhm,
hang out all evening long. you
mhm,
know and yeah, you can do that on some level at conferences, and some people do, but when you're in Orlando and you go to a conference and you're gonna like, I love to stay at an Airbnb with people. That's what I do when I go to
mhm.
Orlando, so I can bring the people I know together for this conference. That doesn't bring me new relationships, though. That only lets me keep or build existing relationships. With Nerd Culture Ministry Summit being at the castle and having your lodging is on the castle grounds, and there's activities happening in the dorms that are there were new relationships that were forming throughout
Yeah,
the evening that I could build and do it. And if you're at a hotel, it's random whether or not you can build relationships with people who are staying at the same place or not. So
yeah,
the dorm piece, to me, it was a fantastic thing of being on site with everyone that's there. I can't say enough about what that does to change the ethos
yeah,
of what's going on. It's us here together doing this.
yeah. And I think that because we're gonna all come from that place, even with the change, we're gonna be able to emulate that again somewhere else. We're just gonna have to be really intentional about it.
What I understand is we will have dorms still. It'll still
Oh,
be where it's taking place is still going to be an enclosed
sweet.
community. So we'll be the ones that are there.
Gotcha.
We'll be able to hang out. which I think is
Nice. I
I
love it.
think they realize that there's a valuable thing that they've got with that and able to
Yeah.
maintain it. So I'm excited.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
Well, with our time that's left, and you can either go with things that have happened on Twitch or YouTube. I don't care which direction you want to go. But what I'd love to have you talk about are some stories of difficult things that you faced as a content creator that you've had to overcome. Two or three things there, and then two or three blessings that you've encountered being a content creator, whether that is something that happened in somebody's life, an interaction that you've had with someone. So I'm gonna leave it open to you, but like two or three things that were a struggle you've overcome, and two or three things that have been a blessing.
So right off the top of my head, I think one of the big struggles I've overcome in the last year, like the thing I've had to learn is how do you actually make interesting short form video?
Yeah.
That that's a challenge. That is a an art form that is constantly evolving. I have not figured it all out yet, but I have gotten to a place where I feel like I'm actually improving regularly instead of just feeling like I'm over here in the you kind of suck at this pool. I'm over in the hey, you've got a decent idea of how to do this. You might not be at the top, but you're growing. And so that's something that was challenging that I had to overcome. I think the other piece for me is, and I know this sounds weird, and I talk about this a lot, and there's a reason why, because it's important to me, is how do I be a Christian in this space without making inherently Christian content?
Right.
Because ultimately, I don't want to be sucked into the Christian algorithm. And so in a Twitch space, like on Twitch, if I'm streaming, I typically throw up the Christian tag most of the time. But, out there in YouTube and Instagram and TikTok where I'm dealing with algorithms that are the
Right.
discoverability piece, I don't want that content to just go to Christians. Christians can watch it and get something out of it, but I believe it's for everyone. And like one of the things that our friend Bubba Stallcup said at Nerd Culture Ministry Conference 2024 was that, like the world out there has this opinion about the church that is not our fault. He says this, it's not our fault, but it is our problem.
I love how he says
And
that.
I love that line. That has resonated with me. And so I want people to find out Christians are into all this nerdy stuff too. They're into Dungeons and Dragons. They're into Baldur's Gate. They're into like whatever I love and I'm into. There's Christians. I can be a Christian and do that. Like the satanic panic, that wasn't real, right? Or it was real, but that it's like over, and it's just really, really interesting. I was actually in an online space yesterday in a Discord. It's not a Discord that has any like it's not a Christian Discord. Let's put it that way. And there were people still talking about the satanic panic in Dungeons and Dragons
Yeah.
yesterday.
Yes.
So that has had a long thing. I want to undo that. And so to undo that, I cannot just live in the Christian algorithm. Now, I'm happy to have that be part of it. And I play with it a little bit more than I used to. I collaborate more with Christian content creators. When this goes up on YouTube, we can do the collaboration piece and it'll say the Church Digital and the Guiding Lantern or whatever. And like that's all well and good. But like as we go, like I want to be seen. So figuring out how do I balance being a Christian making this content, but not being a Christian, quote unquote, content creator has been a challenge. And it's one that I'm still constantly feeling out, constantly praying about. Like all the wisdom that's espoused in these videos, it all has the foundation of a biblical worldview.
Right.
Like I don't talk about anything that would be in contrary to what the Bible would have to say, but it's not clearly biblical. I don't say let's open up to Proverbs, right? There's a lot of wisdom in Proverbs, but I do use Proverbs. In fact, oftentimes Doc will quote Proverbs and he will say, I read in this ancient text of wisdom this saying, and I'll quote directly from Proverbs verbatim. But I didn't just like say it was from the Bible. And that's a way that people can see, oh man, this guy's a Christian. What's he about? And then I do stuff like this. and people will say, "Oh, that's interesting. He's a Christian. Well, I like all this D&D fantasy stuff, so I'm going to stick around for that." And so that's how I'm trying to balance all of that. So that's kind of two big challenges. On the blessing side, a couple of things happen. One, I started on my personal Facebook, started to talk about what I was doing, and I was posting little pictures of lanterns and some fantasy items like a coin bag and all that kind of stuff. And I was talking a little bit about what I was doing. I was showing some pictures of the work in progress that we
Right,
were
right.
doing, and people are like, "What is this that you're doing?" I posted that I had sold, you know, 60 some odd percent or 40 some odd percent of my gaming and novel collection. Had no idea I had some old fantasy novels that were worth like $100 a piece. I found that out. And so like I was going through that and I was talking about that, and I had someone send me a message. I was like, "Hey, I wanna what are you doing? Like, can you explain this a little bit more?" So I tried to explain a little bit, and a part of it, I told people for forever, says, "You're not gonna get it till you see it."
Right.
Like, I don't know how to explain it to you. If you're not on the internet and you're not on like, if you don't understand Tavern Core, you're not gonna understand until you see it. And, I was right. A lot of them did understand after they saw it, but she sent me this message. It's like, "Hey, like, I wanna support what you're doing. Do you have Venmo?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure. Here's my Venmo." And then in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, "Oh, they're gonna throw me like 25 bucks or something." And no, she sent me $300
Nice.
and said, "Hey, I want to support whatever this project is that you're doing. I believe in it. I think I'm supposed to." And that helped do the down payment on that giant slab of wood
Yeah,
that you see
yeah.
behind me. And so God like actually sent that money to me right as I really needed the extra for that piece of wood. And like that was a big blessing to me and something that affirmed in me that this is what I need to be doing. And then at Nerd Culture Ministry Summit 2026, I was sitting in a session with two big name YouTubers with millions of subscribers between them. One of them now works for Mr. Beast, and Christian guys. And they had done the teaching and then they went into like
Yep.
the channel roasting as they called it. And I had two YouTubers with, again, millions of subscribers between them just tell me, "Wow, what you're doing is awesome, just do more."
Yeah.
And that was the only piece of feedback that they
I
gave
know. It
me.
was fantastic.
I was blown away. I was blown away. Like I thought they were going to rip me a new one, and I was expecting it. And they said, "No, you need to figure out how to do long form content. You have a incredible personality. You've got the energy for this. We love the vibe. And here's what we think you ought to do." I did talk to Denver a little bit more afterwards, and he gave me some more specific pieces of advice. It's like, "Hey, like, can you be a little bit critical?" And he said, "Yeah, here's a couple of things that I think that you ought to focus on in the next year." He said,
Mhm.
"One, you just got to figure out how to make more." He's like, he reiterated that. He's like, "I truly believe if you can just get 100 long form videos out there, you're going to be looking at, is this going to be what I do for the rest of my life?" Like he really said, like, "You're going to be thinking about maybe I need to not work so many full-time jobs and make this your job." Like that's what he said to me. And I thought, I don't know if that's something I'll ever do, but that was really, really encouraging to
Oh
me,
yeah.
because I was like, I didn't know what to expect. And that lit a fire under me to figure out how to make long form video that works and the thumbnail piece. And yeah, I'll still do all the shorts and things like that. But now I'm like, okay, how do I do this? How do I translate what I'm doing into the long form video? How does the fantasy nerd piece? So really it ultimately becomes leadership, teaching, and
Yeah.
language from a nerd context, something that's going to relate to it. Like if I look at my analytics include older Gen Z and younger millennials.
Yeah.
It's this weird crossover that I have of basically 32 to 45 or 28 to 45. That's my main area, which overlaps those two generations. And so I know that now. How do I speak to them? How do I encourage them? How do I, and how do I make it fun? Because
Yeah.
ultimately this still has to be fun and interesting to them while being teaching. So like that's something I got to do. What's interesting, talk about analytics on TikTok. You would think it's like 100% dudes. 35% of my watchers are women. And so that's really interesting to me on TikTok. I don't know why that's the case. I need to probably ask some of them why they find it interesting, but it gets me thinking. And so, like, now I'm playing this game, and this goes into like the thing that's challenging again.
Right.
Now I'm playing the learn from analytics game,
Yeah.
and I'm actually responding to analytics. And that's where I'm using that ask YouTube piece.
Right.
So what's interesting, if I go into YouTube Studio right now, I have across the top, I have the Ask Studio button, which is their little Gemini logo.
Yep.
And I can say, hey, based upon my analytics over the last 30 days, where do you think I ought to go next? What are some things I ought to do? And it'll literally tell me, based upon your last video, here's where it dipped, here's where the watch time was more, here's where somebody went back and watched again, here's where the comments said this, that, and the other. And then so I'm having to constantly look and learn. And I think the last thing, which is kind of the blessing and the curse, is the time piece, is trying to find the time or use my time even more wisely. I thought I was pretty good at that, but I'm having to really think about batch editing, batch recording,
Oh,
all these
yeah.
different things
Yeah.
that it's just not. No, a year ago, I'm going to make a video today, and I just make the short and edit it and put it out in about an hour and a half. But now I'm like, no, I need to record 6 or 7 of these. So I've got to
Absolutely.
have props ready. I've got
Right.
to have the scripts ready, and those are going to last me over the next 2 or 3 weeks. And then, oh, I need to batch record 2 long form videos. So I've got to have those 2 scripts ready. And that's on top of everything else I'm doing, like for
Oh,
the real job, right?
yeah.
And so it's just one of those pieces. So that's kind of the blessings and the challenges that I'm faced with right now.
Yeah. Well, the batch making of stuff is such a good learn. I started out with, the podcast would go out and I wasn't doing any shorts or reels last year, but now I'm doing shorts and reels from the podcast. I would like, oh, I'll edit one today, send it out. I'll edit one tomorrow, send it out. I'll do 2, 3 today. I got some extra time. To now, I sit down on Monday for the podcast going out for the week and make every single short and reel. Now it's fresh in my mind. It's going back out. I can comment about it. So, like, when this will go out in about a month, I'll sit down on a Monday. I'll go through, here's all of them. And that's where just my schedule is. Like, here's the ones for the week. I've got them already. Then I just start releasing them to go throughout the week. So that creating and releasing later is really good. And I like I said to begin with, is I had 10 of the podcast in the pocket before I started, and then I started releasing them. So that's why I have a month ahead, so that there's always a release every Tuesday of the podcast where you consume podcasts. Live happens when live happens, but I try to keep a month of them on hand so that if suddenly I'm gone on vacation for a week or more, or I get sick, I still have content going. So I love that idea with the batch. And then to go back to I love the little pieces that of blessing that can do both encourage and affirm. Like,
Mhm.
those are so amazing. You share it, people don't fully grasp it, but they can see that God is calling you to do it. They affirm God's calling you to do it, not by just saying, hey, that sounds like a great idea, but hey, I feel led to give to this cause that you're trying to
Mhm.
start and create. And they may never give again. They may never understand. They may never watch, but God put them and connected them with you in order to give you affirmation and assistance in making it come about. That is such an awesome story.
Yeah. And I don't let it put weight on me. Like, it doesn't like burden
Oh,
me, but it
no.
does it does it does challenge me to not mess this up. Like, there's this constant, like, I don't worry about it. I don't think about it a lot, but I'm like, I have to keep doing this.
Yeah.
Like, there was a moment a little bit before NCMS where I'm like, man, I don't know. It's just like, "Ugh, we've spent so much time and money. I can't stop." But I was feeling, part of it was just work was burning me out at the
Oh,
time. And so it's just like, man, I gotta figure this whole thing out. And so that's just where I've been the last few weeks, is realizing I'm gonna have to treat this with a lot more intentionality and time on the front end, so that it doesn't, like, the guiding lantern doesn't get negatively impacted when I'm exhausted from work,
right.
right?
Right.
And so just using that time a little bit more wisely, and that's the other reason why I don't stream. right?
Right.
I could stream and it might be somewhat successful, but sometimes on my downtime, I was like, I just want to play a game and relax. I am recording footage and thinking about, okay, maybe I could make a video about this experience in this game, like a leadership concept. Like I've been replaying, like I've getting further in Baldur's Gate 3 recently. And so I'm like, oh man, well maybe I could do a video on this thing here, right? But I'm doing that, but I'm just relaxing and just playing a game. So, it's just one of those things where you just have to decide what you want to do. Yeah, the camaraderie on Twitch is fun and streaming's fun, but I ultimately that's not what God's called me to do. And
Right.
so I've just had to say, like, I'm just not gonna do it regularly at all. Now I am starting to wonder, like one of the things I've been working with somebody who's been helping me with like communication gaps and like some areas where I could maybe connect with people more. And so like what would it look like to go live as Doc? So like
Yeah.
fully in
Yeah,
character.
I was wondering about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you're
Yeah.
especially saying on TikTok, and I've not
Mhm.
done this, but I know some people who are doing TikTok live, and they're having
Mhm.
really good success because there's not as wide of an area or range of people doing live on TikTok. So when you go live, TikTok is pushing you. So
Yeah. They
TikTok is
really, really are.
right. So if you were to figure that out and be able to do that, I don't know what the trend is for how long do you need to go live on TikTok. I don't understand that. I haven't looked into it either. But that might be some things to explore and figure that out. So even if you can't do that long term, you could experiment with some of that stuff over the summer when you have more time.
Yeah, that's actually one of the things I'm wanting to do is I'm thinking, okay, well, maybe every Sunday night for an hour, I'll go live on TikTok and YouTube, might as well, in character. This is short form, vertical style,
Yeah.
like right in the screen, and I'll have my laptop off to the side with chat in it and try to be in character as much as possible and just see how that goes. So maybe that's an area where I am live streaming a little bit more because it is fun, right?
Oh
But
yeah.
I know that I'm probably not gonna be the guy that's sitting and playing games on a live stream anymore. I'm doing that in my own time, having fun, but it's just not it's just not probably something I'm gonna do, and I've had a hard time coming to terms with that, honestly, because that's what I did for forever.
Yeah. Well, and maybe it's still just a season. And
Yeah,
and
yeah,
maybe that will come back at some point. Maybe there is the game that's not released yet. That is the game you're supposed to stream live. And
maybe,
until
maybe.
then, you're just sitting on the sidelines of gaming, not sitting on the sidelines, but engaging people in different places. So,
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
all right, man. Anything else that we haven't covered that you want to share, talk about, or mention to people?
You know, like, I wanna go back to what we mentioned before. I really wanna challenge people on this. Don't consume media passively. Don't consume media passively. One, it's forming you. It's forming you. And if you're just consuming passively, maybe you're being formed by things that you don't want to be formed by. Maybe you're letting worldviews slip in that you wouldn't necessarily agree with if you really engage with them. And so, as Christians, we have this unique opportunity to engage with movie and TV and books and games and whatever through a biblical worldview, a biblical lens. And this is the part I don't get to talk about on YouTube very much because, again, I'm not trying to be in the Christian algorithm, but I think it's really, really important is to really think about, okay, I'm really enjoying this game. There's some elements in this that kind of like disturb my spirit a little bit. Is it that I need to stop playing this game, which could be the case? Or is it I need to actually think about what I'm watching, what I'm playing, what I'm doing in this game, and really consider from a biblical worldview what this means and to not engage with it passively, but to engage with it actively and really think about it and discuss it and all those different things to, again, redeem
Yep.
what I'm doing. And it changes everything. Changes the way you approach media, it changes how you consume content, like, all of those different things, and I think for the better. Like, our minds like, relaxing's great. I'm all for relaxing, right? Like, I spent on like, yesterday morning, it was Memorial Day, I spent 4 hours unashamedly just playing Baldur's Gate and having a great time, right? And so like that was fun. But the whole time I'm sitting here actively thinking, okay, well, what does this really mean? How should I feel about this? Like that game in particular,
Oh yeah.
or D&D lore in particular, like there's a lot of stuff with gods and demons and devils and all these different things. Like how do I as a Christian think about this? How do I look at this through a biblical worldview, a biblical lens? Like how would I apply that to my life? And I'm enjoying the game a lot more because of that. And I feel like those elements that a lot of people would look at as irredeemable or bad, maybe, like, so no, I can tell them why I think that this is in moderation, not a bad thing, and why it is redeemable, and why like all these different pieces are really, really important. And to talk about them eloquently. Like I feel like that's a piece that we're missing. When like I love C.S. Lewis, and when he would talk about what was going on in the world, when he would talk about his books, when Tolkien would talk about his stuff, it was so eloquent,
Right.
and they could engage with it so well, talking about all of this fantasy stuff that wasn't real and why it was so important for them to be watching and making and consuming all of that. Like we've got to get back to that as Christians. We got to get back to thinking about all of this stuff. We do a lot of consuming, which is fine, but if we really took the time to engage fully with it, our minds and our hearts and our souls, I feel like it would just be a completely different experience. I give a shout out to one guy, Nerd Pastor Nate. I know
Yeah.
he's been on the podcast. He put out this little book recently talking about how different he talked about video games and anime and all these different pieces and applied them. Like how could we apply this? How can we think about this? And it's really well done and really well put together. I want every Christian to be doing that. I want every Christian to be thinking about the content that they're consuming and the things that they're watching from a biblical worldview and a biblical lens, so that then they can go out and if they've been watching, like there's a anime that's really popular right now called Feiren, and I love it too. It has some really deep stories in it. Go out and be able to talk about that to other anime
Mhm,
fans,
mhm.
and then talk about the depth of it with other anime fans and bring a biblical worldview to it. If you're just passively consuming, you can't really engage in a fandom
Absolutely.
the way Jesus wants you to engage in a fandom, I think anyway.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, and Nerd Pastor Nate was just recently on, so that'll be coming out soon. Was a great conversation. Love that. But one other thing that's interesting, you're talking about the algorithms and what you're doing. So his name escapes me, but he was at NCMS with one child. So he was the rep there from one child, and he and I were having a conversation around things. And this is where my brain is going this year. So if anyone has these questions, I would love these questions. It's it's looking for gaps that the church is missing. So where there's a gaps, what can we do? How do we step in? So one of those gaps that I wrote about is how do we reach the family of deployed military who are overseas? Because I'm facing that in my church and I don't know what we do. So
Mhm.
that's what I'm looking to write into. So his was how do we teach youth pastors to help the people in their youth ministry reset their algorithm? And
Mm.
so I have a blog post. I don't think it's published yet, but I have a blog post that I wrote because he asked that question. And so I went and I did some thought, and I probably got like 5 different suggestions there. One being have everybody, come and bring it out, and then just take and scroll through who you follow for 30 seconds and count how many positive and how many negative people you're following, and just
Mhm.
scroll through, and then say, you can ask this question however you want it. Would you want your grandma to watch what you just watched?
Mm.
Okay, now you need to retrain your algorithm. So here are 5 people I want you to go pull up and follow. So go pull this content up and like it. That other content that you were watching, go unlike, go unfollow. You have to do this and keep working. So
Block, yeah.
block, unfollow. It depends on the platform that you're on, what you need to do to get off of that. And then when you go and you find something, say, I want more of this. So bring me more of this, and get that kind of a thing. So
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of people say, "Well, man, don't you hate social media? Isn't your Facebook feed full of people arguing?" I'm like, "No, I unfollowed all those people.
Yeah.
I blocked all of those words. Aren't you tired? Like, X is just a cesspool. Not if you use the blocked words. It's not. All I see are game stuff and anime stuff and fellow Christian creators. I don't see any drama at all. So you got to just be really intentional about it."
Yeah. Well, on TikTok, I only look at the friends. Like that's it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I only scroll through friends. I'm not looking for new people. I'll find you somewhere else, or you'll find and
Mhm.
follow me. I'll follow you back. That's how. Otherwise, yeah, I'm not go. That's why I don't see the trends there. Because unless my friends are doing the trend, I won't know it's a trend. So,
Yep, yep.
but that's yeah. So you talk about that, and that I think that's a real thing. And I I'm not trying to write those things because I think I'm the one to answer those questions. I just don't see people addressing those questions. So when people are when I hear a question, I go, I'm not going to let this go by. I'm going to write about it so that if someone does a search, hopefully they can find my blog. So the person who's searching for it can find the answers they're looking for. I don't know how
Mhm.
well that's going to do. Those are going to start being released hopefully here soon. But I've written a few things, like I said, trying to address different issues, problems that are out there, and see if I can't put some solutions out into the internet so when people are trying to find something, they're able to find it.
I love it. That's great.
Awesome. So as we're finishing up here, I do usually ask the guest if they've got somebody that they follow that we could go and raid.
Uh, you would think, Samus is on. We can raid Samus. Good old Samus 419.
Yeah, that sounds great
Yeah,
to
let's
me.
do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. She was on our D&D show the other day, so let's send her some more love.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. She's been on the podcast. It took me six months of trying to convince her before coming on the podcast and that one. So you talk about editing problems and that for whatever reason I uploaded that video into I use riverside.fm. I loaded into Riverside, the video's gone, the audio's there. I uploaded again, the video's gone and the audio is there.
Oh,
And I'm like,
no.
what? And then I was like, I downloaded it again, make sure I had it from Twitch a day before it expired. So I like, woo, I got to back up, make sure I've got a good copy. It finally, I uploaded it today. I've got it there. It was supposed to be out today, I believe her podcast was. So she got delayed a week because somebody got bumped up, but she should be out next week. So
Nice, nice.
all right. Well, thank you, everyone, for being here. Appreciate you hanging out. Great conversation, Doc. Man, I learned a lot. I hope people that are watching this are encouraged and
Yeah.
inspired to just say, what if you're feeling that maybe you should do something? Give it a
Mhm.
try, learn from it, even if it's not what you're supposed to do long term. Maybe you learned something there that you're able to apply down the road or for other people, or you're just supposed to go and inspire someone else. And the short time you do it is going to launch somebody else who's going to be doing it long term.
Yeah, that's true. Just do it. Just go out there and make stuff and keep getting better at it while you're doing it.
Absolutely. All right, I'm going to go ahead and start the raid on my side if you want to start it on yours, and then we'll head over there.
Let's do it.
And I'm going to roll my credits.